I'm not allowed to use my favorite Gmail account anymore. So if you want to send us in any queries in relation to the podcast or anything else, it's crimeworld@sundayworld.com. Crimeworld@sundayworld. Is that right, Clodagh?
That's correct.
crimeworld@sundayworld.com.
Well done, Nicola.
Thank you. That was actually my biggest job there now of the day.
Yeah.
To remember that.
It has, but I mean...
short-term memory. I mean, she told me that 2 seconds before I said it and it's still I question myself.
But, you know, you've had a exciting week, so I suppose it is hard to focus on the little things, isn't it, when you've had such an exciting week? Is that right?
It's been busy.
It's been busy, yeah. But I mean, exciting too, would it be?
You were told that this wasn't to be brought up.
Well, I mean, look, let's just say, I'm not going to name any names, right? But a certain female crime podcaster was amongst a select few that were invited to the launch of Boys. Is it Boys Life or is it Boys Life? Boys Life's new single. Wasn't that right?
I actually don't know what they're called because I'm way too cool.
Yeah.
And I'd just like to say, the lady dot protest too much, but I wasn't invited actually at all. I went with somebody who begged me and who told me that she owed me one. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
So I do like to kind of build up a couple of these get out of jail cards every now and then. So yeah.
Now I've never been to a Boys Life gig, unlike you.
No, I haven't.
So, but Boys Life, they'd be made up of Keith Duffy from Boyzone and Brian McFadden from Westlife. And if you merge those two names back, that's where you get Boys Life with a Z, isn't it?
You'll have to talk to their marketing people. I mean, this whole thing, it's actually criminal what you're doing to me.
Is it?
Yeah.
So you did go along. I've never been there, but I do know that. I know you attend lots of cool gigs like Barry Manilow. You were considering going to recently. Who else would? Who else have you been to? So, but
somebody else really uncool.
Yes. Anyway, what's
Rick Astley?
Rick Astley, you were at Rick Astley. Rick Astley. So I suppose
cool stuff too, and I'm not telling you what. No, I'm not telling you.
So, but I haven't ever been there. But I'd say it was quite a gyration-packed event, was it?
I'm actually not going to allow myself to talk about it because I'm just not, because it was...
Yeah, because you did cause a political scandal, didn't you?
I'm not going to allow myself to talk about it because I will end up... Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
I'll end up on one of those, those stories about going to blows with one of them. Or, the way you have these sort of rows get out of control.
We'll leave it at this because I know it's embarrassing. Because we did have, and I don't want to embarrass you, but there was an event where one of the members of Boys Life, and it could be either of the two. I mean, the options are unlimited. And you were spotted obviously being a sort of quite a celebrity yourself. So there was a kind of a celebrity meeting of minds, and he came down off the stage and people were congratulating him, and he came up to you and said...
You've totally made all that up, actually.
Did you enjoy the gig?
That's totally made up now. I bumped into the man at the top of the stairs while I was looking for somebody else and asked him, had he seen this other person?
Yeah. And he asked you then, did you enjoy the gig? And what did you say? I'll say, just in case you forgot, it was grand.
So bad.
Now, he doesn't know you.
It was out of my mouth before I could just get it back in there. I mean, it's an awful thing to say to anybody who's just come off stage, isn't it?
Well, it would be actually. It would be devastating in fairness to him, because, we've obviously been on stage and you come off, no matter who you are, you come off hungry for somebody to tell you did brilliant.
Well, you certainly do. Well, you maybe don't go and ask people.
No, but you do hunger for people to say. You
certainly don't want a grand thrown in, do you?
No, you definitely don't. Not if you've been gyrating to such an extent as you as you approach middle age. You expect
There was a lot of that, yeah. And I mean, in actual fact, it was such a wrong word even. I mean, I'm not going to say I was probably going to stand there and say it was the best gig of my life. But grand was so wrong because it was something, what I saw, the little bit I saw of it, it it caused some emotion, shall we say.
Yeah.
It certainly, I didn't have that sort of neutral, grand.
See, he doesn't know that. He doesn't know you enough to know that compliments don't come naturally to you, do they?
Anyway, he said to me, that's like something my mother would say. And I sort of went, but like, what could I say? I just went, yeah, fair enough. Yeah. There was just no point in even trying to backpedal at that stage.
No, there wasn't.
It was grand.
It was grand.
Mm.
So...
Yeah, and he has gone to a lot of efforts, that chap, to get the teeth whitened and the...
You were giving away which one of the two ones
they both probably have that, do they?
I don't know. So
you done?
I'm done.
Are you done,
actually? I'm done, yeah. I'm done.
Yeah?
I'm done.
That's you done now for a long time, because you know what's going to happen you now.
I'll get cocky.
It's going to come back to bite you, isn't it?
Want to be pursued down the street by Boys Life, angry Boys Life fans. I've never seen them. But
it's going to come back to bite you, what you've just done to me there now.
I'm sure they're
You'll be sitting there squirming in that seat in a wee while. Okay. So first question, I'll put this one to you.
Okay.
You're obsessed with Graham the Wig Whelan. Why? Question mark.
Well, that was I think directed to you.
It was actually.
But I think it's kind of a fair comment. In a sense, look, there's two reasons we've gone back to the Wig Whelan. For a start, he was a major, major figure in gangland crime in Ireland. Like, you can't, I suppose, dismiss that. Not only did he play a role in the Crumlin Drimnagh feud and in the Hutch Kinahan feud, he, in of himself, the guards attempted to bring one of these sort of test cases on directing a criminal organisation, because he became one of the major drug suppliers in South Dublin. So in that sense, that's why we speak about him.
Is he grand?
He's a grand drug dealer. But I suppose it does give rise, obviously, the fact that he ended up with going out with his sister, Conor McGregor. He became the centre of this sort of international story when it went all around the world, TMZ, all of these major sites where, Conor McGregor was going to get Conor McGregor and all of this stuff, which obviously...
Conor McGregor was going to get, he was in big trouble with the Kinahan cartel.
Yeah.
This massive, big drug smuggling organisation were coming to get Conor McGregor.
Yeah.
Because there'd been a fight in a bar and an our lad got walloped.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's the reason we talk about this story is because it's sort of so unusual, really, that trajectory of that life. Like, if you were to sit down and write a film script about Graham Whelan's life, you'd write a great film. It's a natural, it's a real story of going from being going from being a real low of 17-year-old drug dealer caught with a couple of £1 million worth of cocaine to becoming the centre of an international headline storm.
And then to be at obviously the recent McGregor wedding at the top table and, to be right there in the folds of that family and all the excitement, no doubt, that entails.
However, there is a fair point about, I do understand that, from people, if and we have no knowledge that it is otherwise, that since he's come out of prison that he has stayed away from criminality, or certainly he's not come on our radar for that. And should somebody like Graham Whelan be allowed be forgotten, or certainly not keep appearing on Crime World? I mean, it's a fair point. If somebody feels that,
because you mentioned that this one did slide into my own DMs, so it is probably for me.
Yeah.
I think that gives it a little bit of a different tilt to the question, because, I mean, there's constant social media commentary and messages to me, oh, you're obsessed with Daniel Kinahan.
Yeah.
As if it's almost, in a non-professional way.
Yeah.
There's always this narrative from that sort of, gangland supporters that... because I'm a female journalist, I obviously am, in love with all these guys I talk about. It's nothing to do with my professionalism, my journalism, the fact that I'm a crime commentator. It's because clearly I fancy them all. That is actually where that question is coming from. So let's be honest about it.
Yeah.
And no, I'm not obsessed with any single one of them.
No.
I'm simply doing a job and reporting about them. And listen, I'm all for equal opportunities for women out there.
Yeah.
I've always said that. I don't think there's been equal opportunities for women in the underworld.
No, I mean, and look...
There's none of them up there, but
No, I mean, female crime reporters always get that, you know, and they always get a certain style of abuse, if you want, that male reporters in general don't face. No. And you see it in female political reporters who just constantly get accused.
And female politicians are talking about it a lot.
Yeah,
I notice that.
Yeah. They get a type of abuse. That's not everybody gets abuse everywhere on social media. It's just a fact of life. But you can see female political reporters over many years accused of having all sorts of you know, interactions, and honestly none of
affairs and everything. Yeah, but listen, tell you what, if my life was that exciting, I could.
No, anyway, do you have room in your heart for another couple of men when you have a couple of?
When I have a couple of boys, why
already there? Boys' life already.
I was about to call them boys' wives.
A lot of room for
boys' wives. Yeah, no, I don't have any room for any of these types. So our next question is, here's one now. This is a bit different, isn't it? Because I don't know whether I'm going to be able to answer it or you will. Hi, Nicola and Niall. What is the latest on John and Tracy Gilligan? Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, this is another example. Actually, it's sort of, you could look at it in relation to the Graham Whelan question. Like John Gilligan, we haven't heard of since the documentary that was put on Virgin Media and featured in The Star as well, which was obviously a big long interview with John Gilligan over, I think, was it 3 episodes or 2 episodes, where he sort of narrated his life story. And at that point you see him, he's in Spain, and you know, I think at this point that's where he remains. From what we've heard, we actually did a story a few months ago, a very brief story online with a guy just taking a picture of him as he walks past. John Gilligan, he's in sort of Alicante area of Spain. And I think that's what he's been reduced to. I mean, this is an Irish guy. Oh, there's John Gilligan, takes a picture, shouts a bit at him, and John Gilligan sort of waves sheepishly. You know, the idea, the days of John Gilligan being somebody that's a feared sort of criminal that people would.
I think he has, my own little bit of information on him, I think he has reached a status. We know he's reached a certain age, and he was very disliked by people of his own generation.
Yeah.
But I think he's very admired by people of generations under him.
Yeah.
I think he's seen as a mentor.
Yeah.
I think he knows the Spanish legal system inside out.
Yeah.
I think he's very useful to anybody who would like to be basing themselves in the Costa Blanca near Alicante. I think he has been somebody who has been close enough to kind of significant younger criminal bosses, and the likes of Barry Young, who we see was, you know, the Criminal Assets Bureau, the Gardaí certainly are out in Spain trying to identify assets that Barry Young has bought. Like, do remember that John Gilligan made a lot of money in a very short space of time. You know, the gang's, I suppose, murder of the journalist Veronica Guerin resulted in the creation of the Criminal Assets Bureau. And some of his assets were indeed seized, but a lot of his assets had been moved to Spain and successfully laundered through the property market out there. And they were never got.
Yeah.
I mean, up until 2015, I think it was, which is jeepers, nearly 10 years ago, isn't it?
Yeah.
Feels like that was only a couple of years ago. I was out in Spain setting up a sting trying to buy the Judge's Chambers pub, which the family were putting up for sale because they had retained it. Despite his lengthy conviction, despite all the efforts of the Criminal Assets Bureau, they never were able to get the Spanish police on board with them against Gilligan. So you have all that. So he does have a vast amount of knowledge out there. But he also, like the last time he was caught out in Spain, the house full of drugs, a kind of a scenario uncovered that he was using the postal system to get drugs, prescription pills back to the UK to sell them. Little bit of a scam he was running. But, he's brought before the courts. And everybody in the media is getting pretty excited that John Gilligan is going to go to jail. He's in his 70s. He's finally getting done again. He's very confidently telling everybody, I ain't going to jail. I'm going to walk, because he knows the Spanish legal system inside and out.
And he does have younger associates in West Dublin. I mean, and as the Kinahan cartel have sort of dispersed, there have been these groupings that have become more significant. And one of those groupings in the West Dublin area does have close ties with John Gilligan, and he does retain connections with other well-known gangland figures across the country. Some of them that he struck up friendships with in the latter part of his career in jail. But Tracy Gilligan is, I think, still living in rural Ireland. You know, she hasn't come on our radar. You obviously had a good number of interactions with her. I think she's living a quiet life.
She was certainly, up until as recently as I can describe it, she would have been living down near Jessbrook, and she moved to Roscommon after the Criminal Assets Bureau case finally, wound down and all those assets belonging to them were seized. She was living down there, and she was sort of spending summers in Spain, in Alicante, where she would say herself that she has a villa. In actual fact, at the time that we were trying to buy the Judge's Chambers pub, posing as Russian buyers, albeit John Gilligan didn't come out to play. It was Tracy that was sent to do the deal with us. And at the time, she was looking for, I think it was 400,000 for the pub. She was looking for, and we had captured it on video, she was looking for some of the money to be paid, possibly legit, but the rest of it to be paid in the black money, as she called it, dirty money, wanted it under the counter, cash. And she was also offering us at that point, she said she had 2 villas for sale. I think she smelt a rat before we actually had arranged to go and see the villas, but she pretty much gave us directions, and we could work out that they were also in the Alicante Torrevieja area. So she undoubtedly still goes out to Spain, I imagine, goes over and back. She has an ex-partner out there who's the father of one of her children. She has an older daughter, I think, who is gone. She was certainly talking about, as I did speak to her, she was talking about going into education, 3rd level education. Tracy Gilligan, I feel a little bit sorry for, right?
Yeah.
Because I think he was a bad father.
Yeah.
And I think his relationship with her was, and possibly is, very controlling.
Yeah. And she got sucked into, it wouldn't be fair to say she got sucked into a life of crime, but she got sucked into that world at a very young age. And
she married her father's sort of money launderer.
Yeah.
Judge.
Liam Judge.
Liam Judge. Yeah. And the pub, of course, was put in his name, and then he died, and she was sort of left very young.
Yeah.
On her own. And yeah, I just always got the impression that the father kind of used her. She seemed to have a good enough relationship with her mother. From what you see, because you only see little tiny bits, you only see little small windows into it. But she would remain, I imagine, very frustrated with me, Tracy Gilligan.
Yeah.
She was unfortunate enough to come into the crossfire with me when I was really looking for her father.
Yeah.
In particular with that time at the pub. And, we did film her with undercover cameras and all the rest of it. And she didn't come out of it with glory, really.
No.
But yeah, I think probably in a different life, maybe with different parents, she could have been.
Yeah, and maybe has sought to find another way, in fairness to her, in recent years, I'll read. Jamie sent us in a question, really, really long question with a lot in it. But I'm just going to read out a bit of it rather than go through it all, Jamie, because he had a lot of.
What's that, by the way, dear Nicola and Donaldo? And then it's brackets SUIIII. Is that something that the young people say? You know, Clodagh?
Ronaldo.
Oh, Sui. Oh, yeah. Donaldo as in Ronaldo.
Thank you, NASA.
Yes. Very good. But I'll read out a bit of it.
I actually think you could be on my pub quiz team at some stage. That was very, very clever of you there now. We would have gone around that and not had a clue. Donaldo, of course, is
one of my email accounts.
One of your many sort of alter egos.
Yes, exactly. But he reads out an interesting bit in this. He says, I'm interested in any social media accounts associated with Daniel Kinahan or his associates that were active in 2016. These all seem lost in time. And also he asked, what was his mental state following the Regency, that close call? So I think it's interesting to go back and remember it. we talk about Daniel Kinahan now, and he gets referred to as one of the world's most wanted men. And there's obviously a $5 million bounty on his head from the US. But if you go back to 2016, Daniel Kinahan, or certainly 2015, Daniel Kinahan sent a tweet out every week, didn't he?
Daniel Kinahan had his own Twitter account back around 2012 because he was at that point, he sort of exposed himself very early on as being involved with the Matt Macklin gym in Porta Banús, because he was operating on his own Twitter account from memory, DJK256.
That's it?
Yeah. And the things I remember and the things I don't are even scarier, but he was tweeting as this gym was being completed, this boxing club was being completed, about the builders. He was, I think he was certainly referring to them. I don't think he was cross with them.
No.
I think he was sort of thanking them that they were getting the job done quickly, and that he was making it very clear that he was the one dealing with the builders.
Yeah.
And then he used to tweet away about...
I mean, it's you look back at it and you have to remember this is...
That account's still there.
No, it's not there.
Okay.
This is, and a few people have set up fake accounts using the same handle.
Have they?
But it's not his handle. His handle was gone. Now, this is on the aftermath of Operation Shovel, which was 2010, and which he'd been named internationally as this.
There's one there.
Yeah.
At DJK256, Dubai, United Arab Emirates, joined August 2020, which would have been just a few months after he was sanctioned by the US Treasury. Yeah. 31 following and 2 followers, and the posts are protected, it says. Will I press follow?
You can press follow, but it's that's not his real account.
You don't think so?
No, because people then, once he shut down his account, then other people started setting up using his handle.
Yeah.
But for a period of about 2 years, he was not only tweeting about boxing, he was taking pictures of celebrities visiting the gym. I mean, it was quite incredible. We don't go into the names of them, but there was sports figures from across the world, going down, meeting Daniel Kinahan, and he'd take a picture of them and put them on his Twitter page. All of those boxers, and he'd regularly take selfies and put them up. All of that now has come to an end.
And like pre-2016, we would have spent quite a lot of time trawling through Facebook accounts of, associates of the organisation, the Irish Mafia, as they were then known, and key players themselves.
Yeah.
They were all over Facebook, and by and large, they were putting up a lot of their kind of activities.
Yeah.
Which, of course, from a security point of view, isn't a great idea.
No.
To be putting stuff up about what you're actually doing.
But you see, it went into another mode, and I suppose you can see that the Kinahan cartel, while they use social media for the regular purposes, they also attempted to use it for propaganda purposes. And that's really part of the story of the Kinahan cartel. And it's been replicated across the world. Certainly in the Mexican cartels, you've seen it as well with the Sinaloa cartel, where social media has also become a tool for these drug gangs to propagandize, really, to tell their side of the story. They put people out. Daniel Kinahan put people out on podcasts, for example. Told them to do podcasts, mostly in the UK, to get this message across. And social
narrative about himself. But I suppose before that kind of era, which was his Tyson Fury era, was it?
Yeah.
When he was trying to sort of sports wash his reputation and everything. But prior to that, what I think is one of the most interesting periods of time, and what happens is this incredible moment when, in the days and weeks after the Regency Hotel, this bizarre Facebook and Twitter account pops up.
Yeah.
And it changed name from Sarah Sean to...
There was versions of Sean.
Version of this sort of thing. It didn't need to gather a massive following, this account. It was targeting crime journalists in particular, and started to release information that many, it was very confusing in the beginning. Who was this person behind this account? Of course, it was the first to implicate Jonathan Dowdall in the Regency Hotel at all.
Yeah. Then
just known as an ex-Sinn Féin councillor and a businessman.
Yeah.
Totally left field.
Yeah.
presumably unless you were involved in the Hutch organisation.
Yeah.
But in general, I don't think the dogs in the street or any crime journalists knew what the hell Jonathan Dowdall could possibly have been doing, been implicated. But this Twitter site had named him. It named others that were seen as associates of the Hutch organisation. It started this narrative of this conspiracy theory that was ultimately coming from Daniel Kinahan himself, but that the media, the police and the Irish politicians had sort of joined together in order to kill Daniel Kinahan that day, that everybody knew what was going on. It was, everyone was working together. I think the media were there in order to photograph the event happening, but the Hutch organisation were working with the government and with the media to take him out.
It was a general election time. The idea was that there was even more complicated than that Sinn Féin would take some of the blame for this event, and that Sinn Féin were riding high in the polls, and that would see a backlash against Sinn Féin, and Fine Gael would get a boost in the polls from this event, and that they would then win the general election.
It was very complex.
It was complex. So, of course, it didn't go like that, because just any sort of violence on the streets of that type is never good for a government. However, that was put out.
And it was put out through that account. And then there was, people were told to DM it, and they'd be given full narratives on what had happened in the run-up to the split of the Kinahan organisation. And, there was various individuals implicated. There was a story that we knew pretty much to be true about what had happened at Daniel Kinahan's villa some months before this, that this was a previous attempt by the Hutch organisation to kill him at the villa or to shoot him, and the boxer Jamie Moore had been injured badly. Instead, it was a case possibly of mistaken identity or whatever it was. But all this incredible feed of information was coming from these accounts, these Facebook, and, there was an encrypted email, I think, as well. Yeah. And journalists were being targeted and were being sort of given little bits of information. And of course, the whole thing was ultimately investigated, and it was sort of discovered that this was a tool to try and get information back.
Yeah. And
100 people were getting the same piece of information in the hope that the organisers at the centre of this, who were the Kinahan organisation, who were claiming to be intelligence officers floating around there in the world with all this information, that the people they gave the piece of information to would give them something back, and they might get 100 things back.
I mean, if you look at it, the level of sophistication that emerged there, you can see the sort of strategic thinking of the people involved in the Kinahan organisation, like how like if you compared them to something like the Dundon McCarthy's or whatever, these people were operating on another level. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And they were using the sort of tools that are used by multinational corporations, dodgy multinational corporations, maybe, to gather intelligence on rivals, to feed information to the press, to seek to get something back. And you can see how the business world, the legitimate business world, it mirrors this kind of the underworld as well. And probably the same skill set is needed. I mean, it's to rise to the level the Kinahans rose to. It's not enough just to be scary criminals who are going to shoot anybody who opposes them. They obviously are, talented people.
And sophisticated.
Yeah.
And I suppose really when that kind of, encrypted thing came to an end, when Sarah Sean was put out to pasture by the Kinahan organisation, what happened next was what you were talking about, that more clear approach by Daniel Kinahan to get people to say he was a really good guy.
Oh, look, and I mean, there was...
To name him and to...
And there was PR people being consulted and everything. I mean, it wasn't a randomly done operation. And of course, it might have worked.
Yes.
Except for, it might have half worked at least. But the US Treasury put paid to that when they had their press conference, and that was it. That was all over.
Did you say there at the end of that, what was the mental... Did you read this? What was his mental state directly following such a close call?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's an interesting question because, it's very easy to sort of not regard Daniel Kinahan as having somebody who has a kind of as somebody who's a cold and ruthless sort of individual, but no doubt escaping with your life is going to be a traumatic event. I think the much discussed but never seen podcast about James English may have talked about that.
Got a little clip of that, a marketing clip, where of course he talks about how close, or he saw the gunman. He saw the gun. He saw the gun.
He saw the gun, and he saw it being taken out. But I think what you see is that that the reaction of those people to the Regency was not solely the reaction to being publicly humiliated. I suppose, if you want to look at it that way. The way that their instinct was to react with overwhelming violence. And there was this doctrine, of course, with the was it Richard Nixon doctrine, where Henry Kissinger, I think, as chief negotiator. I might be getting this slightly wrong, but he wanted he had this doctrine of this madman doctrine, where Kissinger would say Nixon's crazy. He'd say to his rivals, and I can't predict what he's going to do. And I think they're in gangland, that is that mentality where if somebody threatens them with violence, they feel they have to react with this incredible, overwhelming force, not tit for tat, but tit for tat tat tat, in order to shut it down. And I think that was part of the reaction to the Regency. Was you come at us with a knife, we're going to come at you with a baseball bat, you come at us whatever way, they're going to escalate it. And I think that really shows their mental state, because they were reckless, careless, and sowed the seeds of their own destruction.
And at the same time, there was another element to him, which was get back to business.
Yeah.
And that they never missed a beat really with it all. They kept shipping vast quantities of cocaine across the globe.
That's also an expression of power, I suppose. Yeah. And it's not even solely just about the money, but it's also the expression of power that they can't be stopped.
And kept the whole show on the road.
Yes.
And what we certainly can see, if we look a year later into that, he's in Dubai, it's 2017. You look at the run up to that wedding was 2017, was it? Yeah, the summer of 2017. Yeah. Because if you look at that timeline, what's going on with him, he's planning a wedding, right? He's getting married to Kiva Robinson. It's going to be a crime summit as well as a family and friends affair. He's got Tyson Fury and all his boxers at one table. He has the international cocaine traffickers, the biggest guys in Europe, at another. He probably has family from back home who've absolutely nothing to do with drugs or organised crime whatsoever at other tables, as does his bride-to-be, Kiva Robinson. But if you look at the timeline, in the run-up to that wedding, in the days and weeks before it, he was planning a kill.
Yeah.
He was sending and funding the hitman Imre Arakas to come into Ireland under the, I suppose, the Kavanagh, Bomber Kavanagh and the Byrne organisation were minding him. But Kinahan had sent him in because he wanted a big scalp, and it was like as if he almost wanted a wedding present for himself. They had not had much success in significant kills as such. They wanted somebody really up there in the Hutch organisation, or as they saw it. There had been a series of catastrophic murders where innocent members of the public and the wrong targets were killed, and also where there had been sort of smaller people that had connections, small time criminals maybe with connections, with vague connections to the Hutch organisation. But as he's planning this moment, his moment of glory, which is the crowning moment for him, is that wedding really. Yeah. And I mean, thrones were brought in for the two of them to sit on. He really thought he was the king of his own castle that stage. You've got love and hate going on there, haven't you? Yeah. From a guy who's settling into a new life with a new wife. He's also trying to direct and furious when that murder plot is undone. Yeah.
Well, it's a kind of an interesting one because we can go into this other question from Ryan. I'm not going to read it all again, but he says, Hi, Crime World team. Big fan of the show. My question is regarding sources within organisations. For example, Alison Morrison has done podcasts and articles where she cites senior dissident Republican sources. what is the motivation for these sources to speak out? And then he asks, are they being paid? Well, they certainly aren't.
Being paid. No,
right?
No.
But it is an interesting question because we've just spoken, I suppose, about propaganda being used by criminal organisations. But there is an interesting question about why, like, who speaks? We obviously aren't going to speak names. Why do they speak? And where do these organisations come from? Or why do people speak? And I think it's interesting because you have to remember a couple of things, right? I'm sure Daniel Kinahan's sick of hearing from you and writing about it. But I would fully believe that has not always been the case either. So sometimes these people do want stories about them, do they not? And the questions asked there, about dissident organisations. Like, if you look back in the history of Republican groups, right back to the start of the Troubles, they have had an almost constant dialogue with journalists, both mostly off the record, but also on the record. Dissident groups, or not dissident groups, the Provisional IRA, but all the other groupings that existed up across the border. All of those groups, which were also political in nature, saw the value in propaganda. And I think criminal organisations also see the value in propaganda. Do you not?
Yeah, most certainly. I think they have wings of marketeers and brand ambassadors.
Yeah, now not...
normal companies do.
Yeah, and not obviously people that view themselves as that or have received any training. I think if you look back to the General, Martin, the General Cahill, which a lot of what we speak about in some ways could be traced back to him. I mean, Martin Cahill was an absolute pure genius, was he not?
Why? Because he grabbed the headlines?
Well, it's not just because he grabbed the headlines, because he did grab the headlines. But and I mean, John Gilligan grabbed the headlines, but John Gilligan was not a pure genius. Martin Cahill was a violent, dangerous criminal who was responsible for a large amount of what he did was serious intimidation of people in the criminal community and otherwise. However, he was able to come across as a sort of Robin Hood figure. Now, that Robin Hood figure might not have gone down well with certain newspaper readers or with the Gardaí, but it allowed him this kind of free reign within that community. People would not inform on him. People would hide things for him. People would give him information because he managed to project this image of being an ordinary, decent criminal, I suppose.
Or is it a celebrity? Is there a power to appearing in the media, be it good or bad? It gives you a bigger sense of menace. You are somebody. And
also this untouchability. And a lot of criminals will seek to project that untouchability into the media, won't they? Like, I mean, that is the ultimate. We say they will always complain about being in the papers, but if you're writing stories about how untouchable they are and nobody can get near them, they aren't going to be unhappy because that allows them to have nobody object to what they do. Now, it's interesting, we talked about Liam Byrne there in a previous podcast where we were speaking about him sort of ending up collecting debts and saying to one of the guys who was trying to get money out of it, why don't you Google me? And, he's not alone. If we go back, I can think of another 2 or 3 stories of people who have done the same.
Yeah. Look me up, see who I am.
Look me up, exactly.
Then you'll pay up.
So they are one of the people that speak, the people around them, the people associated with them. A lot of the sources for stories are not from that side. A lot of the sources from stories are people that are, I mean, I think most of the roots of a lot of the stories that we come from are people that have been victims of these guys or family members of victims. And they will be very nervous and they will contact the newspaper and say what's going on in the community. They are big sources, I think.
My experience of it has been that, there's a bit of a kaleidoscope going on because they come for different reasons. Some people, and I'm talking from the serious organised crime groups who come to the table, who meet you, who speak to you, they've been sanctioned to do so from on high. So they are the brand ambassadors. While they mightn't hold that title, they are being sent out to charm you,
Yeah.
but to get across one message.
Yeah.
And to send you home with this in your head that you are going to then repeat.
You're going to get more good stuff.
Whatever this is.
Yeah. Which a lot of it is.
And a lot of it, you might not even understand that message, what it means, or like, it might be inconsequential or why it's important. But of course, that's why it's important, I always think, to try and physically look these people in the eye and not deal with them on encrypted communications, because you lose the ability to work out who they are, who they're linked to, and who they might be against.
Yeah.
So if you're just taking a piece of information and encrypt it, and you have no idea who's behind it, you've lost all your senses.
Yeah.
So that's my thing. Now, other times, people come usually to journalists because they're desperate.
Yeah.
Right? They've reached the end of the line. They've nowhere else to go. They're having difficulties within their criminal organization, maybe, whatever. They feel they're being touted on. They feel that they're going to be left hung out to dry. They sometimes come because they're using drugs.
Yeah.
And they think it's a really good idea to ring up Nicola Tallant and tell her everything. Because, of course, cocaine makes people talk. And it's like the truth serum, isn't it?
Well, it is. And the other thing I always find about...
I always feel a bit sorry for them then, and I kind of don't do them over. And
no. And you know the thing, and I think this is true, journalists and gangland criminals, they are very gossipy people.
Very gossipy.
Aren't they?
Yeah, they like
journalists are gossipy.
Yeah.
If you know a good journalist, they're probably a bit gossipy. Aren't they?
Oh, very gossipy. My God. If you go a week without getting a little bit of information about somebody or other that you know.
But I think gangland criminals are really, really gossipy. It's probably because they're in a small little world and, but they are, sometimes people are just funny. They just want to tell you a little loud story and they might get a little thrill of it going into the paper. But their agenda is just, it's just gossip, like people,
just to put it out there, or to shame somebody, or to,
Yeah, but even in a relatively minor way.
Minor. That's my point. That I think when you can usually meet or speak to, or exactly who you're talking to, or why, you can then start to work out whether you're okay with the agenda.
Yeah.
With the reason you're being given the piece of information. Is it because they want the other guy murdered? That's not okay.
No.
And that if you put out that piece of information, that can result in whatever. But if it's just because they don't like the other bloke.
And they want to say he's gone to Turkey to get his teeth done.
Exactly. You might be kind of okay with that. You might kind of go, well, what, fair enough. And you check it out. You check out the information.
So these things then have to be checked out as much as possible. And that's a whole other conversation about how that's done. But it's amazing where sources come from. And look, it's
a strange world as well, because you're sort of mixing a little bit in that world.
You are. Where
you don't fit in, and you always have to be very clear in your own mind. These are not your friends.
No.
Don't let your guard down. You have to build up a bit of a relationship. You have to give and take a little bit, and you have to, but at the same time, they are never going to really like you.
No.
It's not because they think you're okay. It's because they have an agenda. With the information, you kind of bear that in mind. It's like swimming a little bit with the sharks.
Yeah, but you can't become their agent.
And get out alive.
You can't become their. And I mean, obviously, then a lot of the stories that come from us, and a lot of the stories that come to the Sunday World come through the desk, the emails, and I answer a lot of them. And a lot of them are from people that aren't involved in criminality, but have become the victims of it. Say they live in an area, they've been intimidated, or whatever, and those people tend to have had some interactions with the authorities. Maybe the police ask them to make a statement, or they won't do that, or the city council if they're looking to move, something like that. And they come to the papers because they feel powerless.
Yeah.
And they feel like they want to get this story out, and but that the authorities aren't listening to them. And the authorities struggle to deal with these things, of course. So that's another source of the story, is that people saying this guy is living down the road from me and he's causing chaos and we want it out there.
Yeah.
And those people we really try and listen and look after and we will be really careful with them not to get them in trouble,
For sure. Sometimes the kind of non-victims of crime, the criminals who are looking to meet you, people always go, are you scared of meeting them? Actually, they have more
to lose
because they don't want to be seen with me.
No. No.
And so, it's a two-way street because everyone can be a bit jiggy and a bit nervous at first, and then you just can settle down. You can have, and the other thing is, you find all sorts of people everywhere you go in the world, and even within the underworld, you find people you like.
Yeah, of course.
In another part of the planet, you'd be very happy to go and socialize with them or whatever, but it's not the way it goes. But you find people you like, you find people you don't like, you find people you get on with and those you don't.
And some of the guys are unexpected. I mean, I remember meeting Dutchie Holland for a coffee. And I mean, he was an L grandfather. That's like, but I mean, of course, I mean, he was connected with all these, but I mean, he wouldn't come across like that, a polite sort of.
Yeah.
So people can surprise you, but there are some sinister characters in gangland. And there is also some troubled people who get sucked into things, and there's people that have traumatized by a background that get sucked into it, who in another life could have been, absolutely not ended up in that. But there are some people that seem quite bad to the bone.
Well, let's have one final question before we wrap this up for this, and keep those questions coming in, of course, on Crime World at sundayworld.com. Shane says, hello, Nicola and Niall. I've listened to the podcast for a long time and followed all crime-related things in Ireland since around 2018. One person I've always been fascinated with is Eric Lucky Wilson and his brothers and cousin. I just wonder if there's any updates on the two brothers, Keith and Eric, and when Eric finishes his sentence, is there a chance he could be extradited to Ireland to face charges?
Well, of course, Eric Lucky Wilson is the chief suspect in a number of murders, number of unsolved murders, I suppose. So whether those murders are I doubt he's going to be extradited to face any of those. For example, he's a suspect in the murder of David Babyface Lindsay and Alan Napper, two figures within the criminal underworld. He's also, Eric Wilson, a suspect in the murder of Christopher Gilroy, who was an Irish criminal who disappeared in Spain. All of these murders are unsolved. The passage of time means that sometimes new evidence can come to light if people, their circumstances are different and they can start giving witness statements. Eric Wilson has also been linked to a range of other killings, but I don't think that any of them are imminent or that he's likely to face extradition for those
but
things.
He must be coming near, somewhere near being due out, because he was jailed in Spain around 2011, I think, for a murder that had happened some years previous. A guy called Daniel Smith, a 24-year-old British guy, was in a bar. Lucky Wilson was out there on the run, essentially, and lying low, and there'd been some incident with this guy's girlfriend where Wilson had been inappropriate to her, totally minor.
Yeah.
There was a bit of a fracas, and Wilson went back up to his farmhouse in Coyne and came back down on a motorbike and killed the guy stone dead, and shot him in a crowd. But he was at that point on the run from Gardaí since about 2006, and they wanted to charge him at that point with a firearm seizure in County Carlow and a serious assault in Laois in 2004. Now, there was no suggestion that they had him anywhere near those murders, although he was suspected of them. But he was jailed, I think he's been in jail in Spain since about 2010.
Yeah, and he was given, I think, a 23-year sentence, which they give determinate sort of sentences in.
Do they? So he's 14 years in.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously then most likely there's a period of that would see you released on licence or
well, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, there's been other cases that I've known of that there have been people who have been convicted of murder in Spain have been released after 15, 16 years. So he is not a million miles from that point if he starts to look for parole.
Yeah.
And what's he going to do?
Well, I mean, it's unlikely to land back here, I would think. Again, he had an association around him. He had an organisation around him, maybe a much smaller one, but he certainly was mentored by senior figures in the Ballyfermot area. Whether they want to see him back on their shores, I'd be doubtful of.
Too high profile.
Too high profile. His own brother, obviously, Keith, continues to serve a life sentence for the murder of another hitman, Daniel Gaynor, in Finglas, as part of that ongoing dispute involving the Real IRA and the Wilsons. He is you know,
The other brother, John, was shot dead.
John was shot dead, and his cousin obviously continues to serve a lengthy
Alan
sentence.
Wilson.
It was Alan Wilson, and obviously then his nephew Luke Wilson is also behind bars. Keith Wilson probably has served maybe 14 years of a life sentence. At this rate, prisoners like Keith Wilson are not getting out at that sort of 17-year period where they used to. We're seeing if they, you know, are good prisoners and are engaging with rehabilitation services, they can tend to go to an open prison, you know, after a good long time, and then they will serve another. You know, I think people like Brian Meehan, for example, he's been in an open prison for 6 years, I think at this point, something like that. So they very gradually release them. But, you know, a gangland assassin, as Keith Wilson is going to serve longer than a life sentence of, you know, somebody who's serving murder for maybe something of a different nature. So he's got another, look, if he's out in another 10 years, I'd be surprised.
I agree with that listener, though. They are a fascinating family. I mean, for a family to have sort of created, I mean, it was like the business was assassination.
Yeah, again, like hitmen are kind of rare. Like, you know, hitmen for hire are not.
There's a finite number of people who are willing to kill another human being. It's not like, you know,
for money, like solely for money.
Yeah.
So, I mean, a lot of, I remember getting a call, I think I've said this before, about a guy from Limerick, and he was associated with one of the feuding gangs down there. And he was furious. He was saying, I read that somebody got 10 grand for shooting somebody. He said they wouldn't even give you 500 quid down here. You get told to do it, and if you don't do it, you're going to get the head kicked off you.
He was in the wrong part of the country.
He was in the wrong part of the country. But I mean, a lot of the gangland murders that occur are people that aren't getting paid for it, really.
They're being coerced.
They're being coerced, or they're doing it out of revenge, or because their friend has been, and, you know, various things like that. Obviously, there is money, and there are, but people that are hitmen, but to have a family of them of that type is so uncommon. You know, what went on and what led to it, I suppose, you know, it'll never fully be described or explained, but it is the people that to decide to make a living out of killing people. You know, it takes a particular type of mentality, doesn't it?
It does. And like, I suppose there was one of them was successful, and they brought the next one in, and the next one in, and the next one in. 5 members of the one family. It really is hard to believe. It's hard to match that you know, you have that sort of, you know, murder as the family run business. But we'll leave it at that for today.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you want to leave us with
I think that was grand.
Do you want to leave us with sing us out with a tune, a Boys Life tune? What?
I just say to you, I just think that was grand. Now,
that was grand, was it?
I've insulted myself as well now, so there you go. Keith Duffy. Let's
hope he doesn't listen to all 50 minutes to get named in the last few seconds.
Not. All right, okay.
Yeah.
Talk to you.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs, and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.